Once you sign up, you'll be greeted with this page here. Here you can click subscribe now to begin your plan. In this example, I'm going to select the light yearly plan, which allows up to 3 users, and I'm going to pay by invoice. Now let's take a look at some of the organization settings relevant to us. So here in the organization details, we can select our time zone. So we are in Australia, Melbourne. And we can select the relevant industries. So let's say technology and digital services and transport and logistics, as well as the states relevant to us. So let's say Victoria and Western Australia. And we can save that here. Here in the departments page, we can set up the departments for our organization. So let's say we have an engineering department. And we may also have a finances department. Here in the locations page is where we can designate locations where our business operates. So as an example, we may have a Clayton manufacturing site at 560 Clayton Road, Clayton Vic, phone number, and we've added that just like that. Here in the risk matrix page, we can create a risk matrix, which is a tool to categorize risks. You have the option to manually create your own if your organization has a designated structure to follow. Otherwise, we can use the default one here.
Here we have the legislation library where users can view all legislation available on the platform. You can search for recent changes, changes relevant to certain industries and states, as well as new legislation, updated legislation, upcoming releases, and so on. So as an example, let's search for the recent Transport Act updates. So look at this one. And we can see that this one had a recent update that superseded this old version here.
Here we have our legal register. It's here that you can collate legislation that is relevant specifically to your business. So as an example, everyone needs to comply to the Occupational Health and Safety Act here in Victoria. So we can select that. We can select any departments that it's relevant to and locations. So let's pick some examples. And this is relevant to this ISO standard. We can add necessary controls here if we want and set our evaluation of compliance dates, any extra remarks, and just add it to our legal register like that. And within our legal register, we can search for things that we've added. We can filter by department, location, sort as necessary. Let's take a look at the risk register within Lahebo. So it's here that you can create and track risks within your organization. So let's go ahead and create a risk. Let's say tripping hazard on walkways, potential risk. I'll assign this to some random person. We'll label this as a potential risk at a site somewhere in Melbourne. And let's say this is relevant to the construction department. And in our case, we can add a legal requirement. So occupational health and safety would be relevant to this. Once again, occupational health and safety. We can put this as a fall hazard. We'll go tripping. Let's say wise on walkways, potential tripping hazard, potential consequences, potential harm to employees. And let's say that only safety managers go on these walkways. So this is only relevant to the safety managers. And let's say there's 3 of those people. So 3 potential people at risk. Here we can add a risk rating. So let's say it's likely with moderate consequences, and then we can add some mitigation actions. So for example, we can say review walkways for potential tripping hazards. And after mitigation steps, it's very unlikely for this hazard to exist. And we can put the consequences again as moderate. We can set a due date for this risk to be closed out. So let's just say then, and we'll see this risk has been created and has gone into a waiting review. So this will start the review process. Here, someone will come and review it. They'll say, yes, this risk is acceptable. It exists within the organization. We will track it, and you can go ahead and approve it. Here we have our action management module where we can create actionable items within our organization. We've looked at this briefly already with our reviewing of walkways. Let's add another sample action. So let's say we want to regularly change passwords for security purposes. We can classify this as other. And let's say this is relevant to our finances department for information security. So here we can select due date. Let's say this has to be done by start of September. We can put any relevant documentation in here and any extra remarks here and add this. Now this is an open action and you can send it for approval, attach evidence. Once you've attached your evidence, once you send it for approval, you can leave a comment. Just say example for now. And then the assignee will get a notification to come review this action and approve it as necessary. Here we have our issue management module where we can log issues that pop up within our organization. So as an example, let's add a new issue and let's say a person tripped on wires on the high walkways. This is relevant to occupational health and safety. Add our Clayton manufacturing site in the engineering department. And we're going to categorize this as a near miss. One person was at risk. This is a high priority. And here I'll say tripping hazard led to a near fall from the walkway. And any relevant evidence could be uploaded here. Next, you have your analysis. So you could ask questions such as, why were the wires there in the first place? Why did the person not see the wires? And so on. You can answer them here. You can add mitigation steps, but in this scenario, we already have a risk associated with this. So we can select our wires on walkways risk. And we can also select relevant legislation. So occupational health and safety in our case. And we can see here that we've now logged this issue. Now let's take a look at our dashboard. This provides an overview of everything happening within the organization. So for example, we have our information on risks here, our issues, our actions. Down here we have information on legislation. So we can see there's been some legislative updates. We have a heat map showing risks by severity, as well as risks by department down here and information on our actions. So you can see we have some open and some in review actions. And just as an example, we can see that we have one review, one risk awaiting review here. You can click on this. And this will take us to that risk where we can review it and approve it as necessary. Now let's take a quick look at our reporting module where we can export data from Lahebo for external processing. So just as an example, let's export our risk register. We won't select any filters. We'll create our report. We can see the 2 sample risks that we have in our risk register, and we can export to CSV, which will generate a CSV file for you to process externally, which is very handy for audits and reporting purposes. We'll now just take a quick look at email notifications. So in Lahebo, you'll get notifications via email for a number of purposes, things such as legislative updates. Someone may be requesting your review on a risk that they've created, or in this example, when someone assigns you an action. So we can go and view this action here. And it will take us to our Action Management Center where we can view this newly created action.